Thank you, everyone. It's nice to be here with you. Okay, so the topic for this week. So coming off the reading of the Upanishads from last session, Gary realized, my editor, that there was an opportunity to go even deeper into explaining a bit about the nature of reality. And really the way I would do that is to triangulate from two poems, right? One is from the Upanishad reading we did of the Shwetashwatara Upanishad from last week. And then the other poem I would triangulate off of would be chapter 1 of the Daodejing, and a translation that I wrote for my own personal use about 10 years ago. And it's only because we talked about meditation and we went in all these different directions that we kind of find ourselves almost right on the brink of being able to kind of, take another half step forward and really touch the jugular of what is the nature of reality. And honestly, I struggled with this, right? I wasn't going to go any deeper than last week. It's the stuff I'm now committed to talk about this session is pretty esoteric. It's kind of pointless, really. Pointless, mark that for later, pointless, haha. And I mean, most people don't really care about what the true nature of reality is, right? And that's perfectly valid. That makes total sense. And so with pandemic and thinking about, what is the nature of our collective discomfort and fear in the current moment, in the profane moment, really, that's out there right now. I was actually going to talk about money in this session, and money as a life force, which itself is a deeply sacred topic as well. But Gary, my editor, whom you met in the session last week, pushed for Dao De Jing this session. And we were kind of going back. She was like, well, do whatever you want. And then she kind of, as she will do, she just threw down and kind of said, well, you do whatever you want, but it's like, I've only been waiting for you to teach your translation of the Dao De Jing since, 2012. And I was like, okay, we're doing that now. We're going to pull that card now. So I said, okay, fine. I'll do it. Let's do it in this public session. And so we will do one more super nerd session, talk about the Dao De Jing and the nature of reality. And then next we will talk about the deeper nature of money. Okay. You guys hear the bird out there? It's lovely. I love it. Okay. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to try to do it in as simple and matter-of-fact manner as possible, without getting into all this mystical, flowery language. It's very plain. It's hard to capture and grasp sometimes because it is actually the plainest fact there is. And so it's hard to, like with the Shankara kind of commentary I keep coming back to, where, he comments in the Kena Upanishad that the one who knows, right, the second bird, the one who knows is never itself the object of knowing, because just as fire doesn't burn itself, fire doesn't illumine itself, right? So the second bird never sees itself because it is the seeing. It is the act of seeing, among other things. And that's why the logo preside is only one bird, because you are the second bird, so you can't see yourself. And so in explaining the true nature of reality, it is this roundabout trick of trying to get you to catch a glimpse of yourself in this kind of, kludgy mirror contraption that we'll try to construct with words, with elegant words, and with as simple words as possible. But it's kind of a bar trick, right? It's kind of a trick you would do in a pub, metaphorically speaking. Because you don't need to, you are you, right? You are the nature of reality. So anyway, well, I told Gary we would do it, so we're going to do it. So I'm going to try to build on the building blocks you already have from the last several sessions of Sacred Space sessions. And the beauty of all these being recorded is that you can go back, watch them over, watch them in order. And honestly, this whole Sacred Space series is kind of turning out to be a kind of curriculum. But as a curriculum for what, I couldn't tell you for the life of me, right? So I don't even know what I would call the curriculum. It's kind of just growing organically. So by the way, if any of you have any ideas as to what this whole curriculum is, this whole series, I'd love to know. Shoot me an email, because I'd love to know what I'm doing here. I would like to know. That would be very interesting to me. And those of you who help, I'll maybe come up with some kind of I don't know, prize or something fun, right? Where if you can help me with this, we'll talk about an even nerdier, deeper topic in a private session or something. I don't know. We'll continue making it up as we go. Okay, so for this session, I may lose some of you, and you can ask questions for the next session, but I'm just gonna kind of push into it a little bit, kind of show you what's there to the best of my ability currently in my life. And I'm not going to go any deeper than this session in the series. I'm just going to do this session. It'll get pretty deep, a little bit obscure. And then next week, we'll go back to like normal sacred space comfort, and we'll do our session on money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do it with two poems. I'll start with the Upanishads reading I did last week, in the form of the Shwetashwatara Upanishad. And I'll use the same reading. And I wanted to start with this one because you heard it last week. You've had a week to sit with it, so you're familiar with it. I'll highlight some things in this, and then jump to chapter 1 of the Dao De Jing, which is my own translation that I did maybe 10 years ago, and then triangulate back and forth between the sacred poems, the Daodejing and the Upanishads, from two different sacred world traditions. I mean, India and China, that's right, those are the two pillars, right? It's like the two oldest, largest civilizations that still exist today. And not just exist, I mean, they comprise together about 40% of the world's population. So these two traditions, in the profane and the sacred, have been fabulously successful through like the last 5,000-10,000 years. And it's just a wonder to even contemplate the two. And the deepest kind of core of the two sacred traditions, these two poems, are almost like the founding cornerstones, the keystones of each civilization. One of them anyway, one of the cornerstones. And to try to triangulate them a little bit to help you touch the jugular of the essence of basically the ground of reality that they are describing in two different ways. But they are both in agreement because they're both talking about the one consistent thing. So they're describing it from different angles, but it's in the commonalities between the two poems that you'll hopefully get like the taste of it, because they're talking about the same thing, right? And so I will read the Upanishad first. And actually, as a side note, last week after the session, after it starts, "May the Lord of Love," right? So it's in the masculine gender, and I made some sort of weak apology for the masculine gender of it, and then I went ahead and read it in the as is. And after we closed last week's session, and the camera was off and everything, I was just sitting here. I was moved to pick it up again, and I read it out loud again to myself alone in the room in the feminine gender. And I just, it was like very emotional. So when I read the Upanishad, I'm gonna read it to you today too, in the feminine gender. And I'm going to try to do it, without crying. I'm already failing. So let's do it. Okay, I'm going to try to keep it together, get my big boy pants on, and just get through this. Okay. So instead of Lord of Love, and what I'll do with both poems is I'll read them as if I've typically, in the same way I've been reading all the poems so far. I'll read them once with like my color commentary. And then I'll read it again, probably still with some commentary, but like straight through so you get the feeling. Here, it's less about the rhythm, especially my awful translation. But more about like trying to make sure you squeeze the juice out of it that we're trying to get to you. Okay, so so I'm going to read this. May the goddess of love, who projects herself into this universe of myriad forms, from whom all beings come and to whom all return, grant us the grace of wisdom. Happy Mother's Day, by the way. She is the fire and the sun and the moon and the stars. She is the air and the sea and the creator, Prajapati. She is this boy. She is that girl. She is this man. She is that woman. And she is this old man too, tottering on his staff. Her face is everywhere. She is the blue bird. She is the green bird with red eyes. She is the thunder cloud. And she is the seasons and the seas. She has no beginning. She has no end. She is the source from which the worlds evolve. From her divine power comes forth all this magical show of name and form, of you and me, which casts the spell of pain and pleasure. Only when we pierce through this magic veil do we see the one who appears as many. Two birds of beautiful plumage, comrades inseparable, live on the selfsame tree. One bird eats the fruit of pleasure and pain. The other looks on without eating. Forgetting our divine origin, we become ensnared in the world of change and bewail our helplessness. But when we see the goddess of love in all her glory, adored by all, we go beyond sorrow. What use are the scriptures to anyone who knows not the one source from whom they come, in whom all gods and worlds abide? Only those who realize her as ever present within the heart, attain abiding joy. The goddess, who is the supreme sorceress, brings forth out of herself all the scriptures, oblations, sacrifices, spiritual disciplines, the past and present, the whole universe. Invisible through the magic of Maya, she remains hidden in the hearts of all. That's it. All right. So there are, to make this not an 8-hour session, there are 3 concepts in this passage that I would like to highlight for you. The first is this concept of from her divine power comes forth all this magical show of name and form, of you and me, which casts the spell of pain and pleasure. Only when we pierce through this magic veil do we see the one who appears as many. The one who appears as many. Okay. That's the first concept. So this idea that she is the ground of, so the Lord of love / the goddess of love is reality itself, right? When you say something, is this man, is that woman, is this old man too, is the bluebird, is the green bird, has no beginning, has no end, and who projects herself into the universe of myriad forms, from whom all beings come, all beings, the rock, the stone, the tree, the jerk at work, right? All beings come and to all return. Grant us the grace of wisdom. It's a prayer for her to grant us the ability to see her directly, even for a glimpse. So we know that it's always her, right? Even the person stabbing you is her. You are her. The knife is her, okay? So this goddess that we are referring to here is the ground of reality. Right? That's why it's always curious to me. I mean, it's a patriarchal society, but it's like, it's obvious that the second bird is feminine, right? People will often say, especially medieval, sort of, oh, the sun is masculine and the moon is feminine, and the moon changes her cycles, and she doesn't have her own light, right? She reflects the light of the masculine sun. Ha ha ha, right? It's like, okay, guys, okay. Nice one, right? But the reality is that's not the dichotomy between feminine and masculine, right? The real dichotomy of feminine and masculine is that the sun, powerful, lit, bright, is the masculine, but the feminine is not the moon. The feminine is all of black space. Against which the masculine is a little like ember. I think it was like Buzz Aldrin, like the Apollo 11, or the first men in orbit. I remember this was like in the 60s or something. It's like and when they came back, and they were deeply changed, right? I mean, they don't talk. I mean, they're like guys in the U.S. from the 60s, so they don't really talk about it that I know of. But some reporters asked, did you find God up there? Right? Did you find God? Because it's like the first time, humans in orbit to be able to see space. And one of them, I'll never forget, I forgot who it was, said, yes, she's black. One of the American astronauts said this, yes, she's black. And then the reporters were like, and they just moved on to the next question. So even in that, anyway, there's a whole talk we can do on just that phrase. But so that's the one who appears as many. So the ground of being, and the sun, the masculine, comes out of black space, obviously. Right? The bird number one, the first bird, comes out of the second bird, as we said in the last session. There is only one bird, or more precisely, there's no bird at all. That's the ultimate, right? You realize there's no bird at all. And you look everywhere and you see it everywhere. And we'll see if we'll get there today. Okay, so three concepts. One is this concept of the one who appears as many. When you see many things, you're just seeing the one, but you're just seeing it in its many forms. And we'll try to demonstrate that today. The second is this concept of Maya. Actually, let me do this way. The second is the concept of Maya, and it's here near the end of the passage I selected. The goddess who is the supreme sorceress brings forth out of herself all the scriptures, oblations, sacrifices, spiritual disciplines, the past and present, the whole universe. Invisible through the magic of Maya, she remains hidden in the hearts of all. So what is this Maya? Even Easoran doesn't translate it into like illusion, or there's just no word to translate Maya from Sanskrit into English. Because it means like 7 different things at once. So it means, it can mean illusion. It can mean creative cunning, right? So an artist like Picasso has Maya when he paints his paintings. It also can mean measurement, like when you measure out a meter, right? And you cut the thread. It's one continuous thread, but you're arbitrarily saying this length is a meter. And it's totally arbitrary, which is why we need to keep the standard in the middle. I think it's like in France somewhere, it's like the actual meter. Because if we didn't, it would melt into nothing, and our whole world would fall apart. Our whole illusioned, imagined world, mutually agreed upon imagined world would fall apart. So we have to hang on to it. So the question of Maya is, the one appears as many. How? Through this thing called Maya, this dance move called Maya. Okay, so that's how the one shatters into many. But you don't need to worry. It's always the one. It's just an illusion, which is not to say that it's fake. It's real, right? If I where's my head pen? If I tonk you on the head with this pen, right, you will feel it. It's real. So we can talk about illusion all we want. It's like it's real. Like when I punch you in the face, it's real. Okay. So there's an act that happens, which is Maya, the casting of Maya, that makes you see the world of forms. How do they say it here? Projects herself into this universe of myriad forms, right? And then the listing of everything. It's so Hindu just to like list everything, to like drum it into you, because these were all passed on through oral tradition, so that you couldn't write it down, you'd have to remember it. And the question then is, how does Maya work? Because if you could figure out how Maya worked, you could potentially undo it to see the world as one, not as many. Right? Which would, I mean, the movie's still going on, but if you could figure it out, you could turn the projector off, look at, you know, the movie theater, which is actually kind of boring in itself. But you're like, okay, and then let's turn it back on, and you finish watching the movie. Right? But you have the choice of zipping back and forth as you please. And you do whatever you want. Everyone's just doing whatever they want, which is beautiful, right? It's the play, it's the lila, it's the play, it's the joyousness of the universe. Just like sacred and profane. That's why I'm not like, oh, everyone needs to be more sacred, so we save the world. I'm like, everyone do whatever you want. I'm explaining the sacred just to show you you have this like playroom in the house that you don't have to go to, but you can if you want, and relax. And did you know your house has a hot tub and you can go relax in it at any time? But you don't have to, right? Same thing here. So the one appears as many through the action of Maya. And the mechanism of Maya is hidden in the name, in the word Namarupa. Namarupa, okay, which is name, form. Where does it show up here? Okay. From her divine power comes forth all this magical show, magical, illusory show, projected show of name and form, of you and me, which casts the spell of pain and pleasure. And you're like, oh, pain and pleasure is just an illusion. Again, when I stab you, it still hurts. It's real, right? But illusion in what sense? In the sense that, well, we'll get to that. And so what Nama Rupa is, Nama, name, Rupa, form. And here he just translates it directly, magical show of name and form. And so the way the one ball of thread is cut by Maya, this cutting action, into you and me and she and I and this child and that boy and that girl and that woman, the seas and the thunderclouds, all of that we just read, right? So the way Maya works to cut the one, apparently cut the one into many, is through the mechanism of name and form. When you name something, you cut it off from the rest of reality. And we'll come back to this. But when I call this a pen, I have cut it. I have pointed to the form and given it a name. Pen. Okay. And the minute I do that, I have created a thing called a pen. Now you're like, no, it existed before. It's like, no. Generations of humans before and did that, and then we basically carried it forward. Right? And this will be more specifically described in less flowery language, more matter-of-fact language in the Dao De Jing when it's translated in a non-spiritual way, right? But that is the mechanism, name and form. Because you can't actually cut the physical thing. the reality of the world is that there is only one thing that actually exists. There is no second thing. So the only way I can make the one thing appear to be a second thing, or multiple things, 10,000 things, as we'll see in the Dao De Jing, is by playing this game where I draw a frame around a part of it, a form, and I call it a name. That's the magic of Maya. That's the spell I cast, right? So who am I? I'm Artie. Am I one person? Yes, I'm a sovereign individual. I have rights. I have a social security number. I can sue you if you punch me, blah, 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 right? So I'm one thing, inseparable, indivisible, one sovereign thing. All right, then, what's this? Oh, that's your hand. That's my hand. So it's not me. Well, it is you, but it's also your hand. It's like, okay, you can draw a frame around it and point to it, rupa, form, point to the form, and name it, hand. And you've created a separate thing. There's Artie and his hand. They're two separate things. Sometimes they're the same. I don't know. It gets complicated. Look, squirrel, let's just keep going. Let's keep going. All right, let's go trade some goats in the profound. Let's not talk about it. But the mechanism by which you did that was you pointed to a form and you named it. That's how you cut it off from me. And now there's a separate thing called my hand, and it has its own free will, and it can do all these things, right? Okay, so basically, that's how it works, right? That's how the world of myriad forms gets created. And because of that, if you withdraw the names, you withdraw the things. The things cease to exist. In the Enlightenment sort of state of mind, there are no things and there is no time. This is the direct experience of people who have been there through the levels, whatever. And so another example of this is, okay, so that's my hand. Okay, Sherlock, great. So that's my hand. You've separated it, blah, blah, blah. And I can say, well, what's this thing here? Children will ask, well, Mama, what's this? Or what's this thing on the wall? And she'll be like, well, that's the door, that's the car, that's the dog, that's the cat, that's the wall, that's the ceiling. And then they'll point to some like stain on the wall. And they'll be like, what's that? Some wrinkle in the stucco. Right? And the mom or dad will be like, I don't know. That's nothing. And the kid's like, what are you talking about? That's nothing. It's right there. I can see it. You can see it. Right? But the parent is like, no, that's nothing. That's nothing. Right? Eat your porridge. That's nothing. And the child is trained into what is a thing and what is not a thing. And typically, the things are defined by their usefulness to us in the profane world. Saying the hand is useful because when my hand is broken, I need to fix my hand. Saying this like little wrinkle here is of nobody cares what this is. That's why it doesn't have a name. We don't care about this as a thing. So we don't point out the form and we don't name it. And that's the only reason why my hand is a thing. And this little blotch of pinker skin here is not a thing. Right? And I'm not talking you anatomical physicians out there. You're like, well, that's the whatever. And I'm like, no, I don't mean in general pink skin. I mean this specific patch right here. And like, well, that's just nothing. I was like, yeah, that's no thing, nothing. Now, this is not a critique. It's simply, there's no should here, right? I'm simply describing a state of affairs that is so, right? Which is kind of tiresome because it's like, okay, those are the lines of the soccer field. Can we play now? Can we like get out of the sacred and start like scoring some goals? And I'm like, okay, let's do it. I'm no fun, right, when I talk about this stuff. Now, I apologize. I'm like moving quickly. If I were teaching a real class on this, which I probably never will, I would have visuals. It would probably have to be in person so I can like watch how you're taking it and like nudge you in a different direction or whatever. But for now, we're just going to have to roll with it. And, maybe you can listen to the replay. And we can blame Gowrie for all of this. It's all her fault. Okay. So So when one is able to perceive the true nature of reality, and things fall away and time falls away, and has what some spiritual traditions breathlessly call an enlightenment experience, right? It is not a persistent state. It is an event. It's like you see it. It's like you turn the thing and you see it from this angle. Not as described, but as directly experienced from the form, the nama rupa, the form that you happen to be, human, which is kind of an extraordinary event, because it is extraordinary for a human, a projection of the second bird, to briefly be able to turn around and kind of sort of indirectly see the second bird through the experience of the nama rupa form of the humanoid, right? And then you go back. So it's like being in the sacred. It's like, no, we don't say, oh, I've attained the sacred, I'm done. It's like, no, I've experienced the sacred, it's lovely, and I can zip back and forth as I choose. Right? And the same with sort of seeing reality as the one versus the many. You can zip back and forth as per your pleasure, right? Because you are made in the image of the creator. And just like her, you got bored with the one. And so you projected this sort of game of the many, but you're always still the one. Right? You're just playing. You're like a puppy chasing its tail for no reason, because it's fun. Right? Because it's fun. And so you are a child of her. You're a form. You're a nama rupa of her, and you get to do that too. Right? Because it is fun. Okay. So the ultimate reality of the universe is that there is only one thing that actually exists. It appears as many, but it's actually only one. And it's okay to see it as many. It's okay to see it as one. And the reason you cannot name it, the one thing, we call it the goddess of love, right? But the reason you cannot actually name it is not because of some mystical secret. It's because of the physics of naming. It's just common sense. Because it is the one thing that is the only thing. So there is no second thing. And so you can't name a thing if there is no second thing, right? It's pointless to call me Artie if I'm the only human on the planet and there is no second human. I don't need a name, because there is no Gary, there is no David, there is no Nancy, right? To distinguish between, because, if there's only one, then you don't name it, because there's only one. There is no second thing for the name to nama rupa maya cut it off from. And that's why it's nameless. And that's why it's so hard to talk about the one, right? Because when I say pen, I'm implicitly excluding everything. I say pen in order to say not glasses, not garbage truck, not computer screen, not computer keyboard, pen. Right? And if this is the only thing that existed, you wouldn't even see the outline. It would be like, you'd only see whatever, black, right? Because there's nothing else. There's no outline. There's no background, because the background is not pen. So when you cast the magic spell of nama rupa, you cut it out, and in your mind you say, that's its own thing. Right? But if I do this, then it's like, now there's two things. And you're like, stop it, asshole. And I'm like, okay, well, what about that $50 you owe me from last week? And then we get back into the profane. And it's fun. But you can take a break from the profane anytime you want, right? That's the beauty of the freedom of your sovereignty as a creator. Okay, so the one thing that is nameless in fully accurate terms, to fully name it, you cannot name it, right? It's not a mystical thing. It's just perfect common sense. So Maya then is illusion, creative power, measurement, all these different ways we chop things into nama rupa. Illusion is one way, like don't look. Creative power is one way. Look at this way I've painted, Le Mademoiselle d'Avignon, right? I mean, the ladies of Avignon, Picasso. And you're like, whoa, I've never seen, the human form from that cubist angle before, and you're blown away. Creative power, that's Maya, that's illusion. Measurement, right? Do I have one string of thread, or do I have 5 segments of thread, right? So measurement literally cuts into nama-rupa. Things have names, and therefore all things are an illusion because there is only actually one thing, which is nameless because there's only one thing. And we know from like quantum physics, Einstein, the field is the only reality. There's only the space-time n-dimensional field, and then a planet is just a balled up bit of tinfoil of the field, and gravity is that ball sitting on the field and things. We know all that intellectually. It's one thing to sort of explain it in these lofty terms. It's another to say, explain it in these common sense terms. It's just, you're just naming stuff. If you take away the names, the things disappear. That's all. And then it is yet another thing to try that for yourself and experience it. And that's why meditation is so closely associated with enlightenment. Because when you sit for 8 hours straight for like 3 years, names start to fall away. And in those traditions, it's like they see it as a good thing to stay in that state persistently. Which, if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But it's like, there are multiple rooms in your house for a reason. If I feel like going in the hot tub, I go in the hot tub. If I want to go to the bathroom, I go to the bathroom. It's the beauty of life, to participate in it, in its sorrows and its joys. So Maya, illusion, Nama, Rupa, name, form. And so Nama, Rupa is how Maya works. You cut the one thing into parts. Now, you do this enough across generations. I can not only call this pen, I can take the word P-E-N and abstract it, right, even further. But I can make other words that I can come up with words like justice that don't even exist in physical form. Right, with this level of Nama Rupa, I can build castles in the sky and talk about, justice and love and honor. These things that you can't touch, and which would also disappear like a dream when you wake up the minute we stop using words. And that, by the way, is why time is part of this Maya Nama Rupa illusion as well. Because unlike the pen, where I can still put my finger on it, right? You can't do the same with the past. So if I say last week, that Nama Rupa, last week, like not even in physical space, I'm like creating this construct called last week, which presumes past, right? Presumes all these things, all these other Nama Rupas. And then on top of that, I get to use this light switch of last week and the whole room lights up, okay? And this is not bad. I'm not saying we need to escape from this. I'm just trying to sort of outline how it actually works, right? So I say last week. The minute I say, okay, well, don't use, you can try to flip the switch, but you can't use electricity. You can't use words. Now, without using words, show me this last week. Show me. Show me last week without using words, without the magic spell of Arupa, naming the form in time. Show me last week. Give it to me. Where will you put your finger if I ask you to put your finger on last week? You can't. Because at the ground level, it doesn't exist. Now, in society, we've made it exist. And just like a punch in the face, last week is as real as a baseball bat over the head, right? If I don't pay my rent and it was due last week, the sheriff will come and kick me out of my apartment, right? So I'm not saying it's not real. I'm saying it's very real. But when you get down to the ground of the sacred, and then even below into like the ground of being, into like the guts of the second birth, like the core foundation stones of reality. Last week, it's like, yeah, that's fine for all the stuff we're doing up here for fun, haha. But once the party's over and we get back down to brass tacks, there is no last week, there is no time. I mean, we can spin up the lights and recreate it again anytime you want like that. But if you care, there's no reason why you should care. But if you're going to go there and we go there, there is no time. That's why physicists and theoretical mathematicians, when they get down to the equations, they're like, wait, time doesn't exist. What the fuck? It's like, what's going on? Why? And that's why. Because they have used Namarupa of equations, proofs, theorems, to get back down to try to point at the second bird as well. And when you get down to that level, funny things start to happen, like the speed of light is constant and blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, but the point is, when you do this enough, it's not just pen, oh, ha, ha, pen, right? It's time, it's justice, love, honor, empathy, all these things that kind of dissipate when you take away the words. Right, and so the illusion, not in a bad way, the sort of magical spell of Maya, is this blitzkrieg, multi-dimensional blitzkrieg. It's not just single order, this physical thing, pen. It like abstracts and fractalizes and squares and cubes and multiplies into things like justice, where it's like, dude, if you use justice as another example and tell me justice is an illusion, I'm going to come over and I'm going to like punch you in the face and, you know, don't you dare call the police on me, you jerk, right? And I'm like, no, don't punch me, right? I'm just making an example. I love justice too, right? I love justice too, right? All of those are like complete Maya. But to me, they're real, right? When you translate that line of the Upanishads as illusion, illusion is kind of a judgy term. It's like, oh, we want to, and you know, this phase of life that the Upanishads is designed to support, the forest dweller phase, is that they're trying to help you detach from the world of Maya, away from the profane into the sacred. So they are biased, right? They'll call it illusion and they'll be poo-pooing it. It's like, you know, don't keep going, don't look back, right? So I honor that. But they're describing it for a very specific support of a very specific life phase. But when you look at the overall thing, there's nothing wrong with the illusion. It's like here in the Silicon Valley area, right? All of these like high-tech billionaires are like all about non-duality and how do we come up with like, you know, a contraption, a device that will like throttle your brainwaves, like get you into this non-dual state. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting, but I'm like, what's wrong with duality? All right. I mean, do you not like the vegan burger you're eating right now? Do you not like the textures of the contrast of you know, salty and sweet and fatty? You know, do what's wrong with duality? All right. Okay. So so that's my first read. Let me read it again, because I'll read it twice, and I'll read it again in the feminine just because. And then we'll move on to the Dao De Jing. Okay. And I apologize, this may run longer, but you know, time doesn't exist, right? So I can go all day and you'll all stay with me. All right, so let's do this. May the goddess of love, who projects herself into this universe of myriad forms, from whom all beings come and to whom all return, grant us the grace of wisdom, of seeing, of realization. She is the, and this is the realization that the verse is then delivering to you on a silver plate, right? If you have ears to hear. May the goddess of love grant us the grace of wisdom. She is the fire and the sun and the moon and the stars. She is the air and the sea and the creator Prajapati. She is this boy. She is that girl. She is this man. She is that woman. And she is this old man too, tottering on a staff. Her face is everywhere. She is the bluebird. She is the green bird with red eyes. She is the thundercloud. And she is the seasons and the seas. She has no beginning. She has no end. She is the source from which the worlds evolve. From her divine power comes forth all this magical show of name and form, of you and me, which casts the spell of pain and pleasure. Only when we pierce through this magic veil, not that you have to, but you can if you want to, only when we pierce through this magic veil do we see the one who appears as many. Two birds of beautiful plumage, comrades inseparable, live on the selfsame tree. One bird eats the fruit of pleasure and pain. The other looks on without eating. Forgetting our divine origin, we become ensnared in the world of change and bewail our helplessness. But when we see the goddess of love in all her glory, adored by all, we go beyond sorrow. What use are the scriptures to anyone who knows not the one source from whom they come, in whom all gods and worlds abide? Gods are words, worlds are words. Only those who realize her as ever present within the heart attain abiding joy. The goddess, who is the supreme sorceress, brings forth out of herself all the scriptures, oblations, sacrifices, spiritual disciplines, the past and present, the whole universe. Invisible through the magic of Maya, she remains hidden in the hearts of all. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. All right. Okay, so that's one poem. Can you say which page number? Yes, I can do better than that. Let me pause really quickly. I found it online. So this is not the full Upanishad. It's a fragment. I posted the link to the chat. But the passage I read is embedded in that larger passage. So you can have it. All right, so well, now I lost my window. Okay, here we are. Okay, so you're all still with me. You're all still with me. Thank you. I would have thought half of you would have marked me as spam by now. All right, so let's do this. So this states what is happening, name, form, namarupa, maya, etc., etc. But it does not explain the mechanics of how it happens. I mean, I just explain the mechanics kind of, but how does this thing happen, right? How does this thing happen and then sustain in illusory form, right? How? And to explain a bit more of the how, I will turn to the Dao De Jing. Now, Taoism is a strain of thought that is native to China, native to the Chinese mind, just as Hinduism is native to the Indian mind. And one way to think about Taoism is we've all had exposure to Taoism in some form. And the main exposure is through Zen Buddhism, even the popularized mainstream Zen Buddhism. The way to think about it is that Buddhism came from India to China through the saint Bodhidharma, the first patriarch of Zen Buddhism. And then in China, Indian Buddhism, which is kind of like Hinduism stripped for export, right? So Indian Buddhism blended with the native tradition of Taoism, and together became Chan Buddhism, Chen Buddhism, Chen Fo, right? And Chan Buddhism is Zen. So Chinese Chen Buddhism went to Japan, and in Japanese, Chen is Zen. And then it came to the US, the West. So we have Zen Buddhism. So in Zen, the way to think about Zen Buddhism, the Buddhist part of Zen Buddhism is the part that's like right speech, right dharma, rules, sangha, doing it this way, doing it that way, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, etc. So all the rules, all the structure. And then the Zen part of Zen Buddhism is the Taoist part of Zen Buddhism, where the Taoist part of Zen Buddhism is the part of Zen Buddhism that is the Zen, right? Where the attitude is like, dude, chill, man, everything's going to be all right. For that reason, it could be called Taoist Buddhism instead of Zen Buddhism. I mean, Chan is basically that. But the Taoists are horrible marketers because they're so chill. They're just like, whatever, bro, you just do whatever you want with my stuff. You do you. It's all cool. So that's how I think about that. That's how I think about that. Now, the Dao De Jing is some 81 chapters. It's the central founding text of Taoism. There's all kinds of stories about Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, and how the Dao De Jing came in. I won't go into any of that. We're going to be way over time as it is already. But about 10 years ago, I found myself just, translating these texts because just in my journey, I was diving into the Dao De Jing, and when I kept reading English translations, and after reading about 15 different translations, it was like none of them was quite. I'm like, there's something they're not touching the jugular of here. So I ended up about 10 years ago, just on my own, going to the Chinese text directly. I'm not a native Chinese speaker, so I had to translate each character manually and then sort of look at the overall pattern to try to figure out for myself what aspects of the explanation were missing. So I worked out my own version. And it was just for my own. It wasn't a project or anything. So after translating about 10 chapters, I got bored and stopped because I realized, especially in the Chinese version, they're all footnotes to chapter 1. Chapter 1 explains everything. The whole of Taoism is encapsulated in chapter 1. If it is, excuse my snobbishness, if it is like translated properly, right? And everything else is just a corollary, like a special case drill down in this case, that case. And the authorship of the other chapters, some are like, it's clear the author who wrote chapter 1 wouldn't give a shit about what's in chapter like 36 or whatever, but somebody else appended, and that's fine. That's all fine. So what I want to do is I want to read you the best. I mean, all the translations are fabulous, right? There isn't a bad translation of Dao De Jing. It's just what's useful for different uses. And I'll read you the Stephen Mitchell translation because I just love Stephen Mitchell. He's so lovely. And I'll read this. This is a version you probably all read at some point, just to give you a sense of like the flowery sort of spiritual kumbaya good feeling of the typical English Western spiritual translation. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. The source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. So, first of all, this is Stephen Mitchell. So it's beautiful. It's lyrical, the meter, he's like worked all this stuff out. But when you read the Chinese from a certain angle, you realize it's not trying to be flowery. It's just written in verse because that's how they wrote back then. It is it's as plain a description of the workings of reality, and to use our vocabulary that we have now, it's as plain a description as the workings of the one who appears as many Maya and Namarupa, as if you went on YouTube and YouTube like how to make breakfast pancakes, and it just said step 1, step 2, step 3, and it just laid it out. Now it's in this flowery, beautiful language. It's been the source and influence of like all these, sort of thinkers and histories and civilizations. So we can be forgiven when we approach it to like bring on the sort of spiritual floweriness. But when you read what it's actually saying, it's about as straightforward as explaining how to change the oil in your car, to me anyway. And that was the sort of the taste, the texture that I was missing 10 years ago. Okay, so so what I want to do then, so that's the Mitchell translation. I'll only read it once. I just want to give you a flavor for it. In my notes here, it is grand and obscure, darkness within darkness. That is the key to all understand. Well, what does that even mean, darkness within darkness? That's not helpful, right? So when do I pour the oil into my car? And it's like darkness within darkness. I was like, well, okay, I don't know what to do then, right? And then people beat themselves up and they're like, well, it's just beyond my understanding. I'm terrible at meditation. I'm not a spiritual person. Therefore, I'll stay in the profane. And I'm like, it's your birthright. It's just changing your oil. And it's grand and obscure. And they say, well, the text is obscure. And the reason for that is that the translator will often not have the direct experience of what the text is talking about. Right? If you have never tasted an orange and you're translating a Chinese or a Sanskrit description of the taste and texture of an orange, you will get the meaning because you're translating the words to English, but not the essence, right? And when they describe things that are like not metaphorical to anything in your experience, you'll just be like, I don't know, darkness within darkness. I don't know, whatever. So now I'm going to read mine. Okay, and mine is not lyrical. It's ugly as, okay, it's not musical, but I want to read it because it will tie into and triangulate into the Upanishad that I just read. And it's so, I don't think this is not even public. I've never even published this because it's so, and actually the reason why I never put it out is because depending on what I'm explaining, I will translate certain words differently because there are multiple meanings and innuendos. And I mean, there's multiple plays on words in the Chinese. And so anyway, I'll just do it. So one of the reasons I thought of Daodejing as the next topic was that when I was going through the Upanishads last week in this book, this piece of paper fell out of my physical copy of the Upanishads. So thank you to the Muse. Thank you to the Muse. And happy Mother's Day to the Muse also. All right, so let's read Dao De Jing, chapter 1. The reality that is named with words is not the actual reality. A name as a word over the actual thing is actually deceiving you. All of reality arises just fine without any names. With names, it shatters into millions of separate pieces, i.e. things, i.e. namarupa, i.e. wanwu. So when it shatters into a million pieces, in the Chinese text, there's a word that's called wanwu. Wan is 10,000. From Mahjong, you may 10,000 is one of the suits. So wan, wu is thing. Wu is thing. So when 10,000 things, which means like this in the Upanishads, we would read it as, shoot, I lost my place. Myriad, name and form, this illusion, the whole universe, right? All of reality arises just fine without any names. With names, it shatters into millions of separate pieces, 10,000 things, one wu. Without pointing. And people translate this differently. So without pointing, slash intention is another way of, but pointing is more matter of fact. Intention is like, well, am I a good person? Am I a bad person? I just go pointing. Without pointing, you can see its true nature. You can behold the wonder of the one thing, of the goddess of love as she is in her one state. With pointing, you only see the pieces. So with pointing, you only see this as a pen. You don't see it as, right? In that story of the Buddha, when he held up a flower and smiled, he couldn't help himself, so he smiled slightly. And none of his disciples got it except for Kasyapa. And Kasyapa smiled back, right? He wasn't holding a pen, he was holding a flower. And this is exactly what he was referring to. With names, it shatters into millions of separate pieces, Wan Wu. Without pointing, you can see its true nature. You can behold the wonder. With pointing, you only see the pieces. Now, this is like the extra step. These two things, the wonder, the dissembled pieces, they are the same, but they are named two different things. These two things, the wonder, the goddess of love, the oneness of everything, and the dissembled pieces, the things that are cut through Maya and Namarupa into Wan Wu, 10,000 things. It's the one and the same thing, but they are named two different things. So with names, Namarupa Maya, at this macro level, the one is cut into one and many. The one is cut into non-duality and duality, which is why when people have conferences like pounding their way back into non-duality, I'm like, that's still duality because you're running away from non-duality. And they're like, shut up, Artie. I'm like, okay, you guys do you. I'm going to be over here and do my healing thing, which is what people actually want. So these two things, the wonder and the dissembled pieces, they are the same one thing, but they are named two different things. So this naming scalpel cuts it at that level. It cuts it at the pen level, at the arty level, at the arty's hand level, but it also cuts it at this macro cosmic universal level. The name is the thing that creates all of myriad reality. The phenomenon of naming itself comes out of her. Right? Maya itself comes out of her, the goddess, the second bird, and then cuts everything, creates a second bird. Right? You could almost say the second bird is naming. Right? Like another name for the second bird, haha, is naming. Because the second bird is what says sweet fruit, sour fruit. Sweet is a name. Sour is a name. If you take away the names sweet and sour fruit, there's no distinguishing. Right? You taste it, and it's like, and you taste it, and you're like, oh, but there's no name. So there is no thing. And then there's just fruit, and then fruit disappears as well. Because if you're going to take away those names, you may as well take away fruit as well. And then fruit, like the pen, dissolves back. I mean, nothing's happening molecularly. It's in your perception. It dissolves back into the oneness of everything. Right? And for some people, that can feel very pleasurable. Which is why back in the profane, they curse and swear and try to claw their way back to it. But it's already them. It is them. You never actually lose it. So the last three lines. So these two things, the wonder and the dissembled pieces, they are the same, but they are named two different things. Chung, voila, abracadabra. This fact is a secret, is shrouded in darkness, is obscured. The fact that it is a secret is also a secret. That's how you translate darkness within darkness. What does that mean, darkness within darkness? The fact that nobody tells you, right? The fact that naming is the thing that actually creates everything, that creates the illusion of time, that creates the illusion of last week and Artie and you and me and she and her and the boy and the girl. The fact that Maya is an action of Nama Rupa creating Wan Wu is a secret. And the fact that we've kept it a secret is itself a secret. Because we want the game to go on. We paid for this movie. Turn off the lights, idiot. We paid for popcorn and everything. Let us watch our movie. Jerk. So the fact that this cutting that I'm like explaining to you, the fact that this is how it works is a secret. The fact that we're keeping it a secret is a secret. And the last line, this is the key to everything. Okay. So I'll read it again before we stop, but that's why I never published my version, right? Because I have to like explain it, talk through it. It's not lyrical. It sounds like I'm changing the oil in your car. It's not musical, right? So naming is the thing that cuts the one into many. Wan Wu, Nama Rupa is the action of Maya, and Nama Rupa creates Wan Wu. Naming. Names are the mechanism of illusion. So it's not, you don't need to like swim the river Ganges or be a monk for like 30 years. It's just naming things. You just stop naming things and like the world explodes. And I'll do a demo of this. We try it. You take away, name and pointing are Maya. That's why I called it pointing, not intention, because I'm like brass tacks. Just what are you doing? You're pointing with your finger. Intention. I'm a bad person. I must be more virtuous. Like screw all that. We're just talking about the mechanics. Name and pointing are Maya. When you take away the name, you take away the illusion. And then you see the wonder. You have the direct experience of the one through even any object. Because there's only one thing. So everything you see is the one thing. And the way you use anything, like the Zenist koans, right? 3 pounds of flax, a steaming turd on the sidewalk, the answers to these koans, right? This cough drop. Everything is equally the goddess of love and reality. And the way to say that, the way to see her in her unnamed form, in her whole form, is to unname it, to take away the name. So when I take this and I say, just like with last week, I say, go buy me one of these online. I'm just making this up, without using the words cough drop. You will come back empty-handed. I mean, the keyboard is like, this is the instrument of illusion, because you can only use this with names. This is pecking out individual names, right? All of the internet, all of everything is ones and zeros. It's all named. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I made a ton of my money on like internet, so I love it. I love the profane. But we need to be clear about what is what, right? What is sacred? What is profane? What is the many? What is the one? So that we can have full freedom within these realms that we occupy as, kind of minor gods, to have our like creativity and generativity and fun. We get to have fun too, where it's not our lot only to suffer. As humans, we get to have fun too. So you take away the name, you take away the illusion, you see the wonder, you have direct experience of the one, the eternal, the actual ground of reality, right? It's very refreshing to do that. The first bird is name, pointing, Nama Rupa, Wan Wu, sweet fruit, sweet and sour names. Okay, I talked about that already. The second bird is the goddess of love, the ground of all reality. It watches. It does not eat. I could say that in a different way with our vocabulary now. The second bird, the first bird eats of the fruit of the tree of life. Here a sweet fruit name, here a sour fruit name. The second bird watches, but does not name. The bird watching does not name. Right? So she doesn't say sweet fruit, sour fruit. She just watches everything happen like a blank, like a dumb animal, right? But not so dumb. She does not name. She does not cut because she is the one. Right, so when we talk about just as a standalone, the two birds thing, we say does not judge. And the reason I say judge is because when you're sitting there, if I say don't name things, you're like, what is he even talking about? So I say don't judge because judging feels like you're chopping something, right? You're cutting something off from you. Oh, she's not me. She's a bad mother. I'm a good mother. So she's separate from me and she's lower. So you're like judging, chopping, nama rupaing her down. So I say to get people to get value out of it, I say don't judge. But it's not even judging, because judging is this kind of value-based thing. It's just the elemental thing you're doing is naming to begin with. Even if I say you're a good mother, I'm still naming you. And the second bird does not name. Does not name. Okay. So the secret, the veil between the one and the many. Yeah, I need to find this again. Horrible with my, apologize. Where did it go? Only when we pierce through this magic veil, right, from her divine power comes forth all this magical show of name and form, nama rupa, of you and me, which casts the spell of pain and pleasure. So pain and pleasure, like time, like last week, is also illusory. It's, I mean, you lose a loved one, it's real. You lose a loved one, it's real. The pain is real. So it's not illusion like get over it, it's not real. It's real. But it is a part of the one and many, et cetera, okay? So from her divine power comes forth all this magical show of name and form of you and me, which casts the spell of pain and pleasure. Only when we pierce through this magic veil do we see the one who appears as many. Now, what is the magic veil? Naming is the magic veil. We forget that names create things, right? We think names are the things. But you take away the name and the thing disappears. It's like that Magritte painting that says, this is not a pipe. And you're like, what are you talking about? That's a pipe. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. It's a painting of a pipe. Ha, 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 right? But you could also say, this is not a pen. And you could say, well, it's the computer image of a pen. I'm like, no, I mean this one. This is not a pen, right? And when you take away the word pen, I mean, it's hard for me to put a name to what it feels like when you take away the word pen and you still look at, I can't even say this thing because that's a name. Right, and that's something that you can try later. Jumping ahead, that will be the sacred space exercise that I suggest only if you want, but I'll describe it fully later. Okay. And the key to experiencing this directly is to explore the world of many, but to take away words. As long as you are using words, naming in your mind, it is Wan Wu and Namarupa. But the minute you take away the words, Namarupa disappears. Wan Wu recoalesces back into the one, the Tao. To see the Tao, you simply take away words. That's it. You don't have to go to the monastery. You don't have to do anything. Just practice taking away words. It's very hard to do that in the profane, right? It's easier to do that in the sacred, which is why we're kind of getting way deep into the realm of the sacred, because we kind of wandered in here, and Gauri's like, what about that room? And I'm like, we're not doing that, are we? And yet here we are. Okay. So this is why it is impossible to honestly, accurately, precisely talk about enlightenment experience, because the essence of the experience itself is wordlessness. I'm saying you don't need to meditate and build up your chi or balance your chakras. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to stop using names, essentially, and then you sink deeper and deeper, right, as deep as you want. But then if the practice is to stop using names, how do I talk about it? Right, that is the paradox. It's not malicious. It's not like elitist, like you dumb bunny dunderheads would never understand this. It's like, I can't talk about it because it's wordless. And it's like, oh, he's so mystical. It's like, no, it's just wordless. Right? Take away the feeling of being impressed and it's just wordless. It's just, drain the oil, flush it, and put new oil in. That's it. But this experience then is the pure direct perception of what we have been referring to as the sacred. The sacred. Thinking always lies. You've heard me say this before. Feeling never lies. And this is the underpinning of that. Thinking always lies because thinking is words. You can't think without words. Like I can think in English and Chinese, but I can't think in neither. Thinking requires words, which means the realm of thinking is intrinsically the realm of Namarupa. Which is why meditation is this brute force, kind of 2x4 hitting you of just stop thinking, stop using words. And people don't know how to do that. It's like, I'm like, how do I even do that? And you try to guide them in with the use of words because you're a native word user. So we try to use words to slowly navigate you out of the world of words, which is what teaching spiritual stuff is really ideally. But I don't know. It's not my bliss. I find it to be really boring. So thinking always lies. Thinking is words. Feeling never lies because feeling is not words. You don't need names to feel. I mean, it helps if I name my emotions and I say I'm feeling really frustrated right now and I'm talking to my partner. It's useful for that because then you bring feeling into the realm of words, and then in the profane world, you can start to horse trade and negotiate. That's why it's useful. But you can feel without words. We feel all the time without words. It gets us into all kinds of trouble because children are not using their words. Because then I can't negotiate with you and contain you and cut you and name you and form you as your mother, as your Maya, as your goddess of love, the little boy. Bring it up to the word level so I can prune and shape the little tree. Right? If it's just rumbling underground, I can't control you because I can't cast a magic spell over you with words. That's why we tell children, use your words. And that's not bad. It's not bad. But thinking always lies. Thinking is words. Feeling never lies. You can feel not in Chinese, not in French, and not in English. Right? You can be an animal on a farm and feel. Right? Animals feel because they cry. You can see it on their face. They're like sad. Right? And they have no words. They have no words. So that's why you can always trust feeling. If you get in touch with your feelings and can sort of navigate, that's like half of what we do in healing all the time, right? You can't think without using names. You can feel without using names. That's the giveaway. That's the litmus test of how you call the bluff. The minute you say anything, you create Wan Wu and Namarupa. Words and names are the veil here and now. When you take away the words, there are no things. There is no time. You can't point to last week. Only the present moment exists. Even that's a word. But this is the most plain way of describing this thing that everyone talks about. Oh, the present moment. Be here now, right? Be present. Be mindful. It's not mystical, right? When you take away the veil of Namarupa, name and form, and you stop naming and pointing, the past disappears because I can't produce the past without a name or form, without casting my spell. Next week, not last week, next week, 2022, 2025, those all disappear because I can't say 2025. I can be like, but even that is a symbol. So the past and present disappear, and we're only, you can call it the present moment, but without anything else, without names, it's just, I want to say voila, but even that's a word. I'll read it again. Even Lao Tzu, the author of the Dao De Jing, said, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." Ha ha ha. And yet he said that. Even he had to say that, right? So we can't really talk about it to be truthful and high integrity and accurate. To be full integrity, you don't talk about it. But to lead people out of suffering, you have to use words. So this is what we said several sessions ago, the same theme of paradox versus malice. Do you see it as malicious? It's like, oh, this like highfalutin spiritual guy, he's saying I'm too dumb to understand. He won't tell me. He's like, oh, it's beyond words. And I take that in a shamey way. It's like he's saying I don't understand. So you take it as malicious. Or do you take it as a paradox? It's beyond words. I'm not saying you're a dumbass. I'm saying it is beyond words. And then I explain naming, and then you're like, oh, it was a paradox you didn't understand. But when you look at it in a certain way, you get what I'm saying. It's just like changing your oil. Okay. So it's not elitist. You don't have to join my cult, or you don't have to do any of that. It's the birthright. It's not even the birthright. It is all you are. We all are this. And we can't talk about it because what we are pointing to when we talk about it is the very absence of pointing and words and naming and pointing itself. And that is the paradox of teaching enlightenment. And that's why I don't teach it. It's totally boring, except for today. No, emotions determine thoughts. We can argue about that in future sessions. But you always feel, it's like the old business adage, right? Nobody sues because they actually have a case. People sue because they're pissed, right? And so let's jump back into the profane, and I'll give you that horse sense, common sense version of it. All right, so that's it. I've gotten that off my chest. I've fulfilled Gary's request, and we can now move on. Next week, we'll talk about money, finally. All right, so let's read it again. People want to read it again. So I've read the Upanishad enough, so I'll read this. I'll read this twice, just in case I can't control myself and start commenting. The reality that is named with words is not the actual reality. A name as a word over the actual thing is actually deceiving you. All of reality arises just fine without any names. With names, it shatters into millions of separate pieces. Without pointing and names, you can see its true nature. With pointing, you only see the pieces. These two things, the wonder and the dissembled pieces, they are the same, but they are named two different things. This fact is a secret. The fact that it's a secret is itself a secret. This is the key to everything. Okay. We're only on 11:30. One more time real quick. I don't know if I commented too much. So the reality that is named with words is not the actual reality. A name as a word over the actual thing is actually deceiving you. All of reality arises just fine without any names. With names, it shatters into millions of separate pieces. Without pointing, you can see its true nature. With pointing, you only see the pieces. These two things, the wonder, the dissembled, pointed two pieces, they are the same, but they are named two different things. They are named two different things. This fact is a secret. The fact that it's a secret is itself a secret. This is the key to everything.